Everybody hates Twitter, but despite everything, I still like it. And that's largely because I believe it is still the #1 place to follow and especially discover new talented artists across any style or niche you can think of. I think it's really cool that today anybody with enough skill and passion can use their art to reach thousands or even millions of fans. But you know, having such a big audience and immersing yourself in Twitter's unique user base can come with some downsides as well, especially when you consider the kinds of people that Spotlight is often thrust upon. Yes, if there's one thing that comes to mind when you hear the term Twitter artist, beyond the work itself, it's how bizarrely common insane drama and controversy is in the space. And well, that's what we're here for today, to find out why this is such a common problem by delving into the stories behind some of Twitter's all-time most infamous art accounts. Joining Twitter in early 2020, ZeeFixesArt, or Zena, was a 22-year-old, body-positive, LGBTQ+ Muslim obese feminist non-binary artist who, as she put it, creates art for the purpose of fighting fat phobia. Well, actually, creates might be a bit inaccurate. As you can guess from the name, Zena isn't known for the few original pieces she made, but rather for how they take other people's art and fix it, like you see here. Her MO was to take any vaguely titillating piece of art and basically morph everyone into a morbidly obese brown person, giving them breast reduction surgery and completely covering up any even slightly revealing outfit. Zena really burst onto the scene with her adaptation of the character Usagi-chan. I don't know if you guys remember, but the Usagi-chan anime was basically like the poor man's Nagatoro, and when her anime premiered, her unique design garnered a lot of criticism, especially on Twitter. So the idea of someone fixing her design really isn't the most controversial or out there idea ever, even if Zena's adaptation is just as objectionable for its own reasons.
I really don't know how to put this, but he looks like some kind of fat, gay, pregnant dog or something. It's hard to describe.
From here, Zena would continue fixing other anime characters at an impressive rate, turning countless waifus into visual cognitohazards using that classic Tumblr art style. Now, to be honest, looking back at this whole thing, I don't really think there's anything inherently wrong with her doing this. The art is hard to look at, but at the end of the day, it's really just some fan art of a show filtered through her own specific tastes. And I think people would at worst laugh at this and move on. But what propelled Zena to true infamy was the way they decided to respond to any criticism they were getting for this. My take on Momo from My Hero Academia. Honestly, pretty nasty that they designed a 16-year-old like this. Very gross and nasty. Don't draw your female teen OCs like this, please. To add to the discussion, yes, I do believe I fixed the art. If you don't, you're just another cum-brained pedo weed. Sorry, truth hurts. By making videos on my fix and constantly retweeting to dunk on me, you have all inadvertently given me all the attention my beautiful art deserves. If this was rage bait, it was expertly crafted and resulted in an immense amount of pushback, with multiple very popular videos and endless seething replies. Notably, in response, people would fix Zena's art of her own Sona, making her all kawaii and skinny, and she'd always complain and block them, despite it being the very same thing she was doing to other artists. And the true apex of their controversy, where even the most ardently progressive members of art Twitter turned on them, came when Zena moved on from reinterpreting anime characters to defiling their fellow artists' posts. The most well-known coming when she fixed art by Creepshow Art, an at the time pretty popular artist and YouTuber who's nowadays even more maligned than she is. Only this wasn't just any art, it was a commissioned Creepshow did as a portrait of a real-life fan of hers, which made the whole thing really weird, like as if this real-life person is wrong in Zena's eyes and needed to be fixed. Creepshow would quickly respond, maybe don't use commissioned work of a subscriber because they quite literally do not look like this. Also, the idea of fixing art is lame. Then Zena replies, thanks for the retweet. You really need to work on your poses. They're very stiff and ugly. Shading with purple is a no-go too. Smiley face. Oh my god, I can tell why people hated this person. I actually got pissed off reading that. This point where all the popular videos made on her by ArtCC people and call-out posts from slighted artists, Zena had developed a hatedom that in number far outweighed most normal popular art accounts. And it was very soon after this, at the peak of her infamy, that the legend of ZeeFixesArt would come to an abrupt end at the end of the very year she had appeared, when in October of 2020 the ZeeFixesArt account was hacked. The hacker renamed the account to Cena Loves Fat Phobia and proceeded to absolutely decimate the profile. They began by publishing Cena's blocked terms, which bizarrely had a lot of the things they claimed to support, such as LGBT and BLM. And most notably, whomever the hacker was, happened to be somewhat of an artist themselves, and used their skills to produce and post multiple NSFW art pieces of Cena on the compromised account, as well as inviting anyone else who wanted to contribute, like those from 4chan's artwork critique board, to submit their own mocking caricatures. As for the reaction to this, it would seem people were pretty split. Some thought it was absurd, since Cena had to face so many other artists for not fitting their preferences that they'd have their own account similarly corrupted, whilst others thought the hacker took things way too far by looting what's presumably a real-life representation of Cena. It didn't last too long though, as after a few days the ZeeFixesArt account was fully deleted, whether by the hacker or because of all the people reporting it is unknown. And after that, our brave little art fixer disappeared, never to be heard from again. So who the hell was Cena really, and why did they never return under a new account despite seeming so passionate and active before? Well, there is one theory out there that I think makes everything make sense, and that is the idea that Cena never really existed and this whole account was just one big troll. First off, their whole character just seems too wild to be true. I mean, the outdated stereotypical Tumblr art style, the proverbial minority bingo card that is their bio, along with their exact height and weight, the fact their About Me posts says they're pro-feminism but anti-politics and doctors for some reason. Then there's the fact Cena almost exclusively targeted, at the time, popular anime franchises for their fixes like JoJo and My Hero Academia, yet at the same time, their posts never expressed they were a fan of those shows or any anime for that matter. It really seems like their goal was to get it viewed by as many fans of the shows as possible to garner outrage and attention. And it's so weird they'd exclusively redraw characters to be fat and black in an attempt to desexualize them, which, as some have pointed out, does that not imply fat and brown people are inherently unattractive in their eyes? Finally, there's the convenience of the hack itself. It just so happened to come as they were at the peak of their infamy, but things were starting to get old. Almost like the real person behind the posts got bored or knew they'd be caught soon, so decided to stage a hack to end the tale. A lot of people claim that the art style of the hacker's drawings of Cena and her own art have suspiciously similar art styles. You can see comparisons on screen now, and yeah, they really do line up. To me, it looks like the hacker's art is the real art style and Cena's was them like purposefully drawing worse. Yet at the same time, certain unique traits like their weird blush highlights, the poor line art, and terrible shading carry over. Like, I don't know, it's just awfully convenient that the person who had the know-how and drive to hack them would not only be another artist, but one who has such a similar art style. The real smoking gun for me came from this video, where the artist says you can only see unsent tweets saved as a draft if you are on the device they were written on. So the hacker showing off Cena's unsent tweets like they did would be literally impossible, unless of course there was no hacker and this is the person who created the account and the Cena persona in the first place. Finally, it's said the hacker plugged their own not safe for work Patreon before the account was fully taken down. I personally could not find direct evidence of this, but if it is true, could the ZeeFixesArt account from the start been a troll by some random smut artist who just wanted to mess with Twitter by playing the most stereotypical SJW strawman they could conceive of, and then used the attention to promote their own account once they got bored of it? Every artist we be looking at today encapsulates a different part of Twitter's culture, and I think ZeeFixesArt, better than any other, perfectly represents the concept of rage bait. Purposefully acting stupid and inflammatory just for the sake of attention, no matter how negative it may be. And this was all long before the days of Twitter Premium, so they did this purely for the love of the game, which in a way I do respect. So StoneToss is essentially the modern day reincarnation of those old political cartoons in webcomic form. With literally thousands of strips to his name, StoneToss has the unique distinction of making a handful of comics that became extremely popular as memes and exploitables. He's very Fallen Chungus-esque in that sense. But really, he's known as the right-wing cartoonist guy, although his most popular works are either apolitical or repurposed as memes that are so far removed from their context that aspect is removed, which I think is no coincidence. Now, one thing you hear a lot of people say when defending StoneToss is, I might not agree with the messages, but his comics are really funny. And I kind of used to believe that myself, but for this video, I decided to go through a bunch of his comics, and not just the ones that so happened to leak into my non-political side of the internet. I basically sat down and read a huge number of his comics using the randomized feature on his site, and I'll have a bunch on screen now so you can make your own judgments, but honestly, I really don't think his comics are very funny at all. Maybe every 1 in 30 will get a small nose laugh from me, and that's it. The vast majority just fall into the same strawman format as all those cringy lefty comics you see getting made fun of. The only real difference is StoneToss doesn't insult you with an Aphelis word of lecturing in lieu of a punchline. The best compliment I can give is his comics are very efficient. There's usually little to no dialogue, and they only run for 2 to 4 panels. I think the minimalism is probably the biggest reason he got so popular in the first place, since you can so easily edit them to completely change the joke and messages. One thing I notice is his comics have very clear repeating themes. By which I mean 90% of the time the punchline is Jew bad, trans bad, black man bad, and strangely a lot of anti-circumcision rhetoric as well. Like, I saw at least 25 different comics where the punchline is a trans person kills themselves. I think regardless of your political leanings, you can agree this is extremely mean-spirited. And I don't want to grandstand over edgy jokes, as I don't think any person or topic should be above being made fun of. But even if you do think this is funny, it very quickly loses its shock value with how it's repeated so many times. The fact it's almost always the same few subjects makes it come off like this guy has a genuine, obsessive hatred for these specific groups, rather than seeing them as a way to, well, tell jokes. But of course, something like this is going to rile up a lot of people, and that's where the StoneToss story actually gets interesting. First off, those on the opposite extreme of the political spectrum decided to dedicate themselves to editing his comics to fit their own biases, most famously the subreddit ZeeFixesArt. These are even less funny than the average StoneToss comic, but I guess they're mainly trying to send a message, and they're a lot more upfront about it than he is, saying their goal is to promote anti-fascist messages. Although this really went wrong for them when they finally managed to make an edit that was actually funny. It's based on this comic poking fun at people who constantly call crypto a bubble, editing the last panel to change one of the characters into an Among Us guy and replacing the text with the term Amugus. And this instantly became a huge meme given how much of a cultural phenomenon Among Us and memes based off it were at the time. First, StoneToss got filled with Amugus edits, then it started to spread outside their community, quickly reaching people who didn't even know who StoneToss was. And once he himself embraced the meme, in the end, this stupid edit by a community who expressly existed to destroy him ended up being the catalyst that truly blew up StoneToss to become fully mainstream. At this point, he pretty much just rode his newfound popularity to well over hundreds of thousands of followers, much to the chagrin of the far left side of Twitter. Enough so that on July of 2023, a group would publish a full-on 100-page thread doxing StoneToss. The most notable revelation was that the creator so many call a white supremacist and was so famous for demonizing minorities in his works turned out himself to be Latino.
I really don't know how to put this, but he looks like some kind of fat, gay, pregnant dog or something.
I don't know why this is so common, but this infamous, already very cringe post reads very different knowing what he looks like now. Attention, if you are a single white woman living in Japan, I know an 8.5 out of 10 tall white man employed as a programmer in the US who is currently open. Hit the DMs for details. White man, 8.5 out of 10. Besides this, they also linked StoneToss to his other online identities, most notably a series of Twitter and Reddit accounts where he would incessantly make posts promoting and glazing himself, pretending to be someone else. And most interestingly, post literally hundreds of Reddit comments about circumcision. StoneToss under these accounts makes posts like, "Congratulations on being happy with your circumcision. Really, I wish I was. For me, it was a destruction. a permanent scar from what I think is an otherwise beautiful and natural looking instrument of intimacy. And he also says he felt suicidal over the fact he's circumcised, which is very, very, very ironic considering how his comics about trans people usually go. In the end, StoneToss actually managed to catch the attention of Elon Musk himself with this tweet, and he'd go on to ban the group who posted his docs and censored any accounts who reposted or mentioned StoneToss's full name, which led to its own controversy over Twitter's inconsistent moderation. Now, although I do think some of the revelations from this docs were really funny, I do think it's really effed up of these guys to dox StoneToss over, at the end of the day, making some mean comics. Really, short of actual dangerous criminals, I don't think anyone deserves to have their real life fucked with over internet stuff. And these vigilante extremists are to me even worse than StoneToss himself, since I obviously won't go into detail here, but they included his real name, phone number, place of work, and even frickin' home address. Like, for a guy as controversial as this, all it takes is one especially deranged hater for something really, really bad to happen to him. The latest and final major offense is really the main reason this guy is so hated, even by those without a political bias. And there's really no room for jokes with this one. On May 2nd of 2025, a 17-year-old trans girl posted a picture of a bridge with the caption, "It's a pretty few," before committing, and after her death was confirmed, under that post, StoneToss replied with this comic, really making a mockery of the whole very real situation. He obviously got immense criticism after this, and in response, used it to promote his gay plushie with 41% off if you use the promo code 41%, using the outrage to literally profit off the very real death of a completely unrelated person. I think those who oppose StoneToss build him up to be some crazy supervillain, like he's creating mind control propaganda that'll turn people into unironic Nazis. But in reality, the real person just seems to be extremely sad, lonely person who lashes out at other groups he projects his own immense insecurities onto. And his only real talent is garnering enough outrage to grow his honestly extremely mediocre comics. PuppyChan is a warning, a victim of the digital age. The ultimate example of someone to whom a giant audience and influence is an undeniable curse. Joining the site at the age of 13 in 2016, by the time 2020 came around, PuppyChan had already grown his platform to near the peak of art Twitter, with nearly 100,000 followers. PuppyChan early on had a very cool art style, really getting popular for his drawings of panty and stocking as furries, and his OCs like the trans fox lady Tammy, who was popular enough to get their own Twitter account. There's a kind of loose comic book illustration style with a ton of little details and flares throughout, the bold line art and very loose dynamic energy that simply makes his drawings very fun to look at. But although that was the initial spark, PuppyChan didn't really become famous for his art. No, he was one of those art accounts. You know the ones, where you follow someone for their cool art only to click on their profile and get bombarded by countless reaction images and completely inane tweets along with endless vent posts, with the actual art only making up like 1/50th of the content. Put into perspective just how online PuppyChan was. In the year of 2020, PuppyChan would lovingly compose a grand total of 20,000 tweets, and that's just on his main account. So what did all this content consist of? Well, it'd mainly be a lot of posts giving a unfiltered view into his unique quirks. It should be obvious PuppyChan is a furry, more specifically an otherkin, specifically kinning Snoopy and Blue from Blue's Clues, and Binky, his own OC, which is a small dog in a diaper. He'd share videos of himself stimming, barking, and even their eating habits, such as this famous image of 40 chicken nuggets and 3 large fries with the accompanying text, "Pups gotta eat." One thing that really stands out is that PuppyChan would constantly love bomb his followers.
I just wanted to say that you guys are really nice to me, and that I really don't deserve all this love. I'm sorry, I'm just really emotional right now.
And more concerningly, beg for validation from them with constant posts like, "Are you happy I'm alive?" and other vague pleas for positive attention, spurring on their followers to send him hollow messages of encouragement and validation. Which was such a common thing, it became clear PuppyChan was dependent on Twitter for emotional support. Although obviously an unhealthy coping mechanism, this would truly turn toxic when PuppyChan started to find himself embroiled in more serious drama. One of the first and most infamous was users noticing how PuppyChan's art was changing as their audience grew. It was pointed out a lot that his art seemed to be actively devolving, becoming much more simplistic and sloppily put together, and most strikingly becoming heavily sexualized, making every character fat with giant hips and chests. Almost certainly just prioritizing making art quickly, with little care for things like cleaning line art or properly filling in colors, and relying on sex appeal to garner as much attention and likes as possible, with little care for the quality of the work itself, all while still being a minor. PuppyChan though had built such a dedicated hookbox, using his identity as an LGBT autistic minor with a laundry list of disabilities, that they'd be constantly infantilized and defended by his audience from any form of criticism. Like, their defense squad was so dedicated, PuppyChan even got defended for tracing, which is like the #1 sin of our Twitter. They'd even go as far as to attack others who dared even lightly criticize him, like this user who critiqued PuppyChan's new art style, and after PuppyChan responded by posting how their feelings were hurt, his fanbase proceeded to completely dogpile this random user, going as far as to mass report their GoFundMe, raising funds for surgery for their dog who got shot, getting it taken down. And PuppyChan did absolutely nothing to discourage this insane level of harassment, all over not liking someone's art. The dog was okay though. Far worse though was when controversy arose that even his own audience would voice complaints over, such as people claiming him drawing his Tammy character in this new hyper-sexualized style, and other weird posts was evidence of him fetishizing trans people. Puppy would concerningly often play the ultimate counter card, suicide baiting. It eventually became a damn near monthly occurrence where PuppyChan would get involved in drama on the site, and when it resulted in him getting any level of criticism, he'd start to fake tweet about wanting to end it all, leading to concerned messages and the criticism turning to worry till he'd return the next day and repeat the cycle again a few weeks later. It was clear PuppyChan had formed a completely toxic dependence on Twitter, with no problem manipulating their own audience, and even if their hearts were in the right place, all this coddling from his audience achieved was further encouraging this destructive lifestyle. PuppyChan's house of cards would finally start to fall in 2021 when he had turned 18. Within days, he'd start tweeting about how annoying being followed by minors was, despite turning 18 like a few days ago, and would start to post NSFW art on their main account, which was previously a self-described safe space for minors, with tens of thousands still following it. This time the pushback from his audience was unanimous, and PuppyChan would publish a surprisingly level-headed apology, but would quickly follow this up by privating the account after posting another direct thread on his life, which was upsetting but hardly surprising, as at this point the crash out to sewer baiting had gone from monthly to weekly, and it was clear PuppyChan's mind was devolving just as rapidly as his art. After getting into another inane drama, ending with the person they were arguing with supposedly being doxxed, PuppyChan would have their most intense crash out yet, where they private their main account and log into their alt, which had a smile dog profile picture, adding to the insanity of the situation where he'd have a supposed full mental break, claiming to be possessed by a demon, with insane posts like claiming to have had a miscarriage and threatening to self-harm again, only this time they actually showed proof. That being him holding a single blackberry, which he was apparently allergic to. Ending the 2-day crash out with pretending to have mentally regressed, I guess like turning into their Binky persona, posting as if he was a baby dog. Of course, despite the particular insanity of this one, PuppyChan would again return to Twitter as if nothing had happened, adding an 18+ disclaimer to his account and using it as an excuse to assault his fans with a slew of sloppily drawn, pornographic artwork in between the usual sympathy baiting and drama posting. Despite everything, he still had a huge fan base that would coddle and only encourage his obviously toxic relationship with the website. But things would finally come to an end by 2022, when it was revealed by PuppyChan himself he was in contact with a fellow NSFW artist who was only 15 years old. PuppyChan was constantly criticized for interacting with minors and publishing not safe for work art to their account without properly vetting out underage followers. So interacting privately and even retweeting art made by this minor led to him being characterized as a groomer by Twitter. This situation turned out to be more nuanced than it initially appeared, as PuppyChan actually didn't want to interact with them and was extremely distant from the minor, but he would constantly spam PuppyChan, begging for him to interact and retweet his work, forcing PuppyChan's hand by, ironically, suabaiting if PuppyChan attempted to refuse or cut contact. However, to Twitter and PuppyChan's previously all-so forgiving audience, the narrative was set, and this ended up being used as an acceptable reason to finally turn on PuppyChan. With all the baiting, irresponsible handling of his audience, deterioration of their art, and general weird behavior now being openly mocked and criticized by everyone in his audience and outside of it, and his account losing thousands of followers by the day. The fallout so intense, it pushed PuppyChan to finally leave Twitter for good. Now, I should note this is obviously a very condensed version of PuppyChan's tale. You can check out the Turkey Tom video if you want all the details, but to be honest, I gave you all the stuff worth seeing, as this whole thing is just the same cycle repeating over and over, and it quickly becomes more depressing than funny. It's really a clear example of how some people should not be given such a huge audience, especially at a young age, and the perverse, ultimately harmful way these wholesome Chungus Twitter fanbases will treat someone they see as vulnerable, only enabling their destructive behavior, and how quickly they'll turn that hollow support into complete vitriol, tearing them back down the moment it's seen as socially acceptable to do so. But where is PuppyChan today? Well, he still does have an account, only, of course it's on Blue Sky now. It's cool to see he generally seems to have settled into being like a normal, sane human from what I can tell, at least by online artist standards. Likely a combination of just growing up and not having to bear the brunt of such a huge audience. And best of all, their art has improved like an insane amount. Like, I was actually blown away by how good his new stuff looks, even though the subject matter isn't really to my taste. But yeah, at least there is a reasonably happy ending to this. Khyle's very first public work on Twitter was uploaded in July of 2021 and has 11,000 likes. Holy moly. Yeah, this is easily the most popular artist featured in this video, and even if you don't know their name, you've definitely seen this guy's work before. He's also easily the most aesthetically pleasing and technically impressive artist we'll see today. He has this awfully unique, candid framing for his beautifully rendered yet stripped back painting style that always has this crazy perspective and use of very human, believable poses and expressions. It's a little hard to explain, but they almost feel real, like they're actual images these characters took on like their phones or something. Going back to his early posts, you'll notice they're mostly pretty straightforward, cute, or slightly spicy pinup style stuff. It wasn't until 2021 when he'd start to implement what really made him so popular, and that'd be combining the cute anime girls with meme culture. Like, instead of just drawing the 10,897th image of Asuka standing around, he draws her experiencing intense road rage, and there's this ugly baby for some reason. The Eto Blah meme, but it's a waifu-fied Chris Chan in court. Or Power recreating the Burger King foot lettuce image. Once he started implementing this really unique gimmick, and his work reached the incredibly well-polished, distinct style he's known for today, practically every major post would be surpassing the 100k likes mark. Usually they're a bit more subtle, where at first glance it's just some wholesome fan art, but the longer you look, the more you find these odd details throughout. One of my favorites is this Komi-san series he did, where as the images go on, it becomes clear Komi is getting cucked by her own mom. But there is a second, far more interesting narrative going through these, that being Najimi seems to be a drug addict. The illustrations seem to be released out of order, but you can track a pretty wild narrative throughout them. First is this image where Komi appears to be catching Najimi snorting coke in the school bathroom. Then, judging from this one, I guess Komi gets roped into his bad habits. And after this, they end up going into the drug trade together, with them setting up a marijuana farm in Mexico. Only for them to end up getting caught trying to smuggle the goods back into Japan, ending with Komi getting tried in international court. But I mean, beyond just being funny, the fact these all also work as really beautiful pieces of fan art really elevates Khyle's profile for me. And honestly, I'd say he's probably one of my favorite online artists. But this is a video about infamous Twitter artists, not my art crushes. So what did he do to earn the title of that artist that used to be plastered on the top of his bio? Well, sometimes the jokes hidden in his work could be a little edgy. Sometimes very edgy, and sometimes he'll illustrate Anya Forger being brought to work at a concentration camp and post it on Holocaust Remembrance Day. If you were around at the time, you would remember the sheer virality and legendary backlash this drawing spawned. At first there were the usual lighthearted, oh my god this is so messed up reaction images you see under all his posts, but as this one spread further, it obviously garnered a lot of genuine ire as well. Now really, I think most people took this as like an edgy joke, albeit a very edgy joke and one you could easily call in bad taste, especially considering when it was posted. But more sensitive users would call it a Nazi dog whistle. I saw a lot of people on Reddit pointing to him previously drawing PuppyChan for some reason, and also being commissioned by a right-wing VTuber and his general provocative persona to call Khyle himself a racist. Whilst on the other side, people would say it's merely an edgy joke, no different from his other art, with effed up hidden details. There were arguments as to whether the image was really that bad, as people pointed to the fact Anya had a history book about the atrocities of the Holocaust and the caption of "she doesn't want to go to school" to claim it was just a school trip, and Anya was crying because of how sad the history is. But then people pointed out the other kids had pickaxes and were doing manual labor inside the gates. So, no, it was as bad as it looked. I personally don't think this was like malicious or meant to demean the subject matter. I believe the humor is supposed to come from the shock value of contrasting such a wholesome character with like the most heavy and depressing real world thing possible. But at the same time, it is obviously really pushing things, so I can't fault others for finding it so offensive. But you would really have to infer a lot to say this, and one other art piece of a VTuber doing the Trump pose definitely proves Khyle is a neo-Nazi. Like, I don't think this is a StoneToss situation where the art exists purely to spread hate and it's done over and over to the point where it becomes uncomfortable. But as for how this affected Khyle himself, it kind of just didn't, as he sort of just continued posting as normal since then, only becoming more and more popular. The closest thing to a response was that he posted "support my atrocities" and linked to his Patreon in a pinned tweet during the whole drama, and it really only served to make him more popular, but was definitely the point where he became equally as infamous as he is famous, at least in some circles. One last thing worth mentioning is the pushback he, and more prominently his clones, have been getting recently. I suppose really anything gets hated on when it becomes too popular, but you do see people shitting on Khyle, saying it's basically the same joke over and over. But I think that's a little reductive. He certainly follows a formula, but there's a lot of variation on what the punchline is, and I think it works well as far as catching the viewer off guard. People also criticize how his immense popularity inspired a lot of clone accounts that basically do the same thing but not as good. Although I think it's cool to be inspired by others with your art, as it's normal for people to do that at first and then branch off into their own voice later. Although I would prefer if they didn't make every punchline something NSFW, since at that point you're just making softcore porn. But I have also seen some I thought were genuinely pretty funny. To be fair, Khyle does rely on the "it's secretly something lewd" thing a lot as well, and I don't know, sometimes Twitter, despite how degenerate the site seems, can be very puritanical when it comes to using that as an excuse to judge others, and perhaps no one encapsulates that better than our next subject. I have to admit I'm stretching the rules a little bit here, as this guy isn't necessarily a Twitter artist, more so a streamer slash YouTube animator, but he has or had a big presence on Twitter, and it's where what we're focusing on today went down. If you go to JoCat's YouTube channel today, you'll see his most popular videos are all Dungeons and Dragons focused stuff, primarily his crap guide to D&D series, which is kinda like a storytime style illustrated guide for people getting into the game. And people really like these. They have a lot of views. We're talking millions and millions each, but his most popular video really sticks out at an astronomical 13 million views, titled "I Like Girls JoCat Animation." Looks interesting, let's check it out.
sad that there's no muscly girls in here. Well, I mean, yeah, but, you know, sure, I like to joke around and talk about how, oh, I'm strong women all the time, but that's not the only girls I like. I like big girls, pretty kitty girls, really witty girls, singing ditty girls. I like the leggy girls with the nice thighs. I like a good chest, no matter what size. I like the belly folds, I like the six packs, really tall queens, and the short stacks. From the mild girls to the wild girls. You got style, girls, make them round, girls. Yeah, I just really like girls.
Would you believe me if this animation caused one of the most intense and enduring hate mobs in the history of Twitter, leading to death threats, doxing, and its creator being run off the internet entirely? Okay, so the video is an animation over a little joke he did on stream, where he basically just sang the Lizzo song Boys, but made it about women. The crazy part is, when JoCat initially posted the video on his channel, his audience unanimously loved it. But about a year after release, it started to spread outside of his audience on Twitter, and well, it didn't go over as well there. It basically became the cringe thing to hate on that week, leading to immense flaming from reasonable if a little mean, like posts calling the video cringe and gay, to stuff as intense as people claiming the video was objectifying women and attacking JoCat's feminine persona, calling it a fake soft boy thing to ensnare women. Yes, a significant number of people were implying this guy was a sexual predator over a stupid cartoon. It's a little hard to illustrate, but this is not me cherry picking a few especially bad comments. If you were there, I'm sure you remember just how intense and toxic Twitter was towards this guy at the time. I get it if you think the video's a little cringe, but it is completely harmless. The worst thing I can say is his taste in waifus is painfully basic. I mean, Lady Demarisu, 2B, a bunch of VTubers, Midna and Ru. Well, that part's okay. JoCat actually chose the incredibly rare, mature, smart option of not making any direct response to this hate. His wife did make this very funny drawing about it though, but eventually the trend died off and things mostly went back to normal for him, or so it seemed. It was a few months later he would do a pseudo-sequel to his now seminal work, when he replied to one of those weird "which girl would you sleep with" posts that got stolen and reposted from some random NSFW account. JoCat deciding to redraw each of the girls with him on like a cute date. Honestly, I can't find anything to criticize with this one. The original context of what he was replying to was basically asking like, which one do you want to sleep with? And JoCat reimagined them as like actual people he's connecting with. Twitter didn't see things that way, as essentially a smaller scale version of the "I like girls" reaction took place, only reaching its crescendo when someone once again reposted the infamous animation to millions of impressions, indirectly leading another hate mob to JoCat. JoCat chose to not respond to the trolls and genuine slander the first time, but as it turned out, the backlash he was getting was really affecting him, which I guess you'd expect from anyone. But when he made a twitlonger finally expressing his feelings on everything, it was so much worse than you would have expected. According to JoCat, simply for this 30-second animation, he was en masse sent death threats, not just towards him, but to family members as well. There were attempts to dox him, and he was even sent, quote, suspicious packages in the mail. It was because of all this, JoCat announced he was leaving the internet and the huge platform he had spent years building. I've always kept quiet about it because speaking up would just encourage more and be presented as my own fault as well. But if that's the trade-off to do something like sharing the things I'm proud of on the internet, seeing as I'm writing this, it's probably an indicator that I'm just not cut out for it. And the best thing for everyone would be for me to stop and pursue something else. I'm simply not strong enough to keep doing this if it means I just have to accept this kind and amount of distress. I don't know, this whole situation really encapsulates how insanely toxic Twitter can be. The whole mob mentality and intoxicating high of like half this giant site ganging up on one random guy. Like, especially for something as innocuous as an animation you think is cringe, at the end of the day, it is just straight up bullying. And it's easy to forget there was a real person behind that avatar that has to bear the brunt of all that. And it's not even like JoCat was being overly sensitive. The guy only spoke up a year later when the whole thing was ruining his real life. The guy has literally zero real controversies either before or after this. But after the twitlonger came out, I think people kind of realized how far things had gone. And nowadays when his name gets brought up, people are a lot more understanding and mostly just talk about how retarded and unwarranted the whole situation was. And I'm happy to say JoCat did end up returning to the internet, and from what I can tell is doing better now than ever with his usual content. Telepurte is a pretty famous account. He really exploded in popularity in 2020 when he undertook the absolutely Herculean challenge of posting an animation every single day for an entire year. Has an extremely distinct and appealing art style, seemingly birthed from a mix of his very own solid draftsmanship, streamlined to suit quick animations, and with an emphasis on blacked out shapes, lending strong contrast and striking boldness. The heavy use of black, I believe, comes from him doing a similar daily animation challenge the previous 2 years, only over 1 month for Inktober.
Oh, these? My boobies? My massive fucking titties? My super stuffed up milkies? My hunger bonger doinky boinkies? My fucking fabric stretching, wind flapping, gravity welling sex mounds? You mean these super duper ultra hyper goddamn motherfucking...
I fell down.
One common trend you've probably noticed by now is that his work tends to be quite spicy. I definitely think it's reductive to say Telly is like a softcore artist, but it's undeniably a huge team, and another thing he's pretty good at. The borderline NSFW stuff, combined with his consistency and just the sheer artistic talent on display, was enough to catapult him to the upper echelon of Twitter art accounts, with him sitting well over 1 million followers today. Modern day Telepurte mostly posts illustrations, from more meme stuff to risque art and sometimes a mix of the two, along with a highly successful Patreon for full-on lewds of his famous OCs. He has great art and, well, that's it really. At least that was until very recently. On July of this year, Telepurte would upload this piece to his Twitter, featuring his character posing in a bikini with this text. Sigh, come here, say hi to me. Stop being a coward and treat me like a person. Kindness, respect, care, and dignity. I'm not a prize, not a measurement of success. I'm a person. I just want a chill, respectful interaction. Listen to me and value me as a person. This would be the origin point for the truly bizarre drama that has catapulted him back into the Twitter mainstream. The idea of the post I think is pretty obvious, right? You should respect women and not see them as just sex objects. I mean, yeah, it's kind of like no shit. It's a little bit of an odd choice to have her drawn all pervy with that message, but I think he's going for some kind of contrast where people who sexualize themselves should still be respected as people, although it is especially hard to take seriously when not 6 posts before this is a link to his Patreon to see an uncensored version of this very same character dressed as a schoolgirl, literally spreading cheeks. Is this what you gotta do for an A+? Like, I think it's a perfectly fine message, even if it's the most basic form of I'm 14 and this is deep, light progressivism I've ever seen. It's just really odd to come from this account so out of nowhere. I don't think I'm alone, as under the post, Telly got a lot of responses. Now, considering everything that follows, I think it's important to note the criticism he received for this post was, for one, only a vast minority of the comments were critical, and 2, they were also very light criticism. They are mostly just saying the same things I did, pointing out how it was a little hard to take seriously with how basic the message was and how melodramatic he delivered it. But Telly decided to reply with another piece 3 days later, this time seemingly shaming his audience for getting angry at his last posts. Confusingly, despite the last piece making such a big deal over how people should treat his drawings as a person, this one says, "I'm just a drawing." This time he did get a lot more critical replies, seeing as he was directly attacking anyone who criticized him, leading to a final piece later that day. "Life is too beautiful to let negativity be your life model. Sit above it, or be part of it. I'm going up either way." Okay, dude. He would end things with a big wall of text 2 days after that. He says, "I wanted to draw a hot woman and then make her say something, but I didn't want to make her say stupid gooner bullshit anymore, so I made her say my opinions instead. The opinion people should be treated with respect, care, kindness, and dignity." Then he says people replying reveal themselves to be cruel, bitter, and dehumanizing, saying the response to his previous post gave him a glimpse into what women go through almost every day, following that with saying how it isn't hypocritical to draw NSFW and still respect women, which, yeah, again, I agree with you. And ends it with, no one wants to be treated unkindly or disrespectfully, not even you. I will not apologize. I stand firm in this position. If it makes you angry, I invite you to ask yourself why. To be honest, I find this so ridiculous. I agree with every point the guy is making, but it's how he says it. It comes off so insanely self-aggrandizing over the most basic, inoffensive stance ever, and saying he's experiencing the same thing women do every day when you're getting light criticism for taking yourself too seriously on Twitter. And then framing that criticism to be people dehumanizing women when in reality they're criticizing you for being pretentious. And it's entirely a problem of your own making multiple posts complaining about the very small amount of criticism you are getting and actively shaming anyone for daring to question your delivery. I do feel bad for him with the NSFW art section. I do think it's ignorant for people to say that, but again, this is only a problem that exists because you decided to virtue signal and lecture your audience in between posting cheeks and then get mad at them for pointing out how out of place it was. But anyway, things would calm down after this. Telly returning to his usual non-browbeating posts and people pretty quickly forgetting about everything. That was until this October when he'd pretty much repeat the entire cycle again for some reason. I'll make a quick note, people would point out how this coincidentally happened around the time he got a VTuber GF who apparently has a safe for work-ish OnlyFans, saying that it gave him, I guess you could say, Gooner's remorse. But honestly, I think that's kinda unfounded since the dates really don't line up, and I feel like people are just drawing parallels to the whole iDubbbz thing and kind of insisting there has to be some egomaniac controlling woman behind this. But no, there really is no evidence of that, and this strikes me as being 100% self-inflicted. I don't draw for likes. I draw because it could help someone who needs it. Art is a medium for words. Words have power. Oh my god, bruh. Here we go again. When this got a similarly bewildered response, he'd follow it up with another, even bigger wall of text. I'm not going to read all of this, but you can pause if you want to. He mainly expresses confusion at why he's getting criticism and just comes off as extremely pretentious this time. The part that stands out the most to me is this line on how people took his message with the initial art. So maybe you think, well, it's insultingly basic and insulting my intelligence and moral compass. But if nothing's groundbreaking and it's morally sound, why aren't you living by it? I think this line perfectly captures the root of all of Telepurte's problems. He seemingly cannot comprehend people just find this virtue signaling annoying despite agreeing with the message. He assumes anyone who finds him posting preachy images to his audience, who follows him for sexy ladies and memes obnoxious, must think that because they don't respect women and are upset at him for being progressive. But I'll speak for myself and say, yes, I agree with your message. Only the most radical of incels would disagree with that basic statement. But the way you are saying it, then posting these big vent pieces over how people are being mean to you, only to turn around and have this high and mighty attitude, literally depicting yourself as being above it and shaming anyone who criticizes you, only to write entire novels complaining about this thing you so don't care about, well, it's just kind of cringe. And by this point, it seemed even his core fans were getting tired of this charade, as this post and every reply he made under was brutally ratioed, most notably by this potential man meme of him. That was pretty brutal. Leading to Telly, ironically, deleting his post asking why he's getting criticized, along with all his other drama-related pieces, and posting this drawing. I hope this means he's just gonna avoid drama from now on. I don't even know, this whole situation is just so weird. Like, I feel bad for how he clearly cannot handle the criticism, but at the same time it is entirely a hell of his own making. If this had just ended with the initial tweet he made, with a kind-hearted although heavy-handed message, it'd be a little funny and like, that's it. But the insane quintupling down and self-victimizing just made this whole thing kind of embarrassing, to be honest. I think the guy should either have the confidence to make his statement and stand by it instead of feeling the need to constantly defend himself and let it devolve into a pointless slap fight with his own audience, or just stick to making art and stop acting like he's some enlightened mind who's chosen by God to save women on his Twitter meme account. Since it really seems like all he's achieving is causing himself a lot of pointless stress and pushing away normal people who just like want to see cool art. But as I'm finishing this video, I realized Telepurte kind of fits a lot of the people here, in that he's, you know, not a bad guy or anything, and his heart is clearly in the right place, but he just kinda sucks at PR. And that's the video. I actually had a ton of fun making this one. Going over multiple people in one video kept things really interesting, even if it takes a lot more work. There's obviously a lot of other people I could have talked about, but this video was already way too long. So let me know if there's any interesting accounts you'd like to see in a part 2, and until then, if you want some truly premium Twitter drama brainrot, check out my 3-part epic on the Goat of X, Fallen Chungus. And thank you for watching.